Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the 2022 United States Grand Prix weekend. Firstly, starting here on this Thursday night for me, and Thursday, I think, for almost all of you watching, unless you're from, obviously, Asia, Australia, or that part of the world. Yeah, here on this Thursday, starting off the weekend preview for this US Grand Prix. I know, obviously, we went back to the US Grand Prix last year after a year's hiatus in 2020, but this is my first coverage of the US Grand Prix since 2019, because I had a little break, I think, towards this time last year from doing content because I was a bit, stressed out mentally. So, yeah, it's great to be covering the US Grand Prix again, of course, at the Circuit of Americas, and I'm sure that this weekend is going to be a good weekend. Most Grand Prix at this track do tend to be exciting. Last year's Grand Prix, for example, was a thriller to, from the very start of the race to the very, very end. It was such a good race, and there's been so many great races, great moments here at the Circuit of Americas, so I'm sure we'll get more of that this weekend, especially on Sunday. And yeah, cannot wait to see what happens this weekend. And by the way, just so you guys know, I've looked at the weather forecast for the US Grand Prix. It will be sunny, no clouds at all, and actually quite hot. I think the temperatures will be ranging, the air temperature between 30 and, say, 35 degrees Celsius. So it's going to be a very, very warm US Grand Prix in Austin, Texas. So yeah, looking forward to this weekend. Hopefully you guys are too, and hello to you guys. Hopefully you're all doing well, no matter what time it is in your part of the world, or no matter where you're from. Hopefully you're all having as best a day as possible, given whatever circumstances you are going through. And I hope that not only this evening will you join me in previewing this weekend's Grand Prix, but you'll be joining me for an absolute mountain of coverage that I'm going to be bringing you guys this weekend, where I'm going to be covering, and I'll get more so into this later in the stream in terms of my schedule for this weekend of content, but I will be covering every session live this weekend instead of just doing practice 3, qualifying, and the race. So yeah, it's going to be a very long, busy, and probably very enjoyable weekend, as again, the US Grand Prix does tend to be. But what we're going to get into in this stream tonight is we're going to get into obviously previewing how I think the teams will get on around this track. We'll also get into some stats regarding certain teams and drivers and their history around here. And also we will get into Red Bull and what they need to win the Constructors World Championship for this weekend, which is definitely very possible for them to, accomplish that. So yeah, we'll get into all of that and get into an onboard lap of the track. And obviously I'll come to you guys throughout the stream to see what you guys have to say in regards to the teams and drivers and how you think they will get on. And we'll also get into a couple bits of news as well. And also a couple things from the track that I want to show you. Or not from the track, but from the Grand Prix so far itself. That I want to show you guys that's happened today. So yeah, we'll get into that soon enough. But yeah, good to see all of you here. But now let's, before we get into, the teams and how I think they'll do respectively, let's get into the championship standings. So Max Verstappen, as you guys know, is the Drivers' World Champion. That's why he has a C next to his name. And he is, 113 points clear of Sergio Perez, who is now second, only 1 point ahead of Charles Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship. And looking at the Grand Prix coming up, it's going to be very close, the fight for second in the championship between Perez and Leclerc. I think Leclerc will probably win that battle, to be honest, because I think Leclerc will be more consistent and I think is, of course, the better driver, and I think will be able to be more consistently right up there than Perez will, even though I think Perez will have a decent end, final 4 races of the season. But it is a close fight there for second between Perez and Leclerc. Then you've got a close fight for 4th and 5th in the championship with George Russell only 5 points clear of Carlos Sainz in 5th. Lewis Hamilton is 6th with Lando Norris in 7th, Ocon 8th, and then Alonso 9th and Valtteri Bottas in P10. But yeah, from the driver's side, the battles we're looking at really is who is going to finish second in the championship, and also I would probably include Lewis Hamilton in this fight, the three-way fight for 4th place in the championship between Russell, Sainz and Hamilton. Don't count out Lewis Hamilton for finishing, say, 4th in the championship, because we know that, if the car's more so working in his favour, we know he can absolutely close the gap to the cars ahead of him. And he's only, 27 points behind his teammate, which is not a massive gap. So, yeah, I think it's definitely possible. And, of course, there's a decent fight below Hamilton for best of the rest in the drivers' standings. Now, on the constructor side, Red Bull leading by 165 points, I believe, over the Ferrari team, if I can speak English. Mercedes are third. Mercedes are now going to finish in third. I don't think they can really, at this point, catch Ferrari, because I don't think Ferrari are, even if they implode some more before the season's over, I don't think Mercedes have enough pace, and I don't think they'll be able to score enough points with the amount of races left to actually catch up to the Scuderia. Alpine are back in 4th after a fantastic Japanese Grand Prix, where they scored, how many points was it? 18 points, so McLaren only scored 1, so yeah, Alpine back into P4, McLaren 5th, and then Alfa Romeo in 6th, but they have now a contender for that 6th place, being Aston Martin in 7th, with Haas 8th, AlphaTauri 9th, obviously Haas and AlphaTauri level on points, and Williams in 10th, and closer to the teams ahead, but still destined to finish last in this year's World Championship. But with Red Bull, I will get into this again when I go through the Red Bull team in just a second, but for Red Bull to win the title this weekend, the Constructors' title, they need to outscore Ferrari by 18 points. So, you'll have to work out the certain permutations for that in terms of what Red Bull need to outscore Ferrari. So, for example, if Red Bull had a 1-2 this weekend and Max Verstappen got the fastest lap points, that would be 44 points. So, yeah, if Red Bull had scored that, they would have to hope that Ferrari scored, no more than 26 points, I believe. Which would be, if Ferrari were to score 26 points this weekend, that would be third and 5th would be 25 points, so about that. So yeah, to win the Constructors' title this weekend, I mean, it's definitely possible, but it's still going to be tough to a certain extent for them to finally clinch the Constructors' title. But it is inevitable. They are going to do it either this weekend or next weekend in Mexico City. But now, and actually, let me get back onto the Constructors' standings, because I just wanted to mention as well, like I did with the driver's side, the certain fights to look out for. So yeah, Red Bull will obviously look out to see when they finally wrap up the Constructors' title. Alpine and McLaren, that is still a very important fight for 4th in the championship. And now, Alfa Romeo versus Aston Martin, a very important fight for 6th. Maybe you could include AlphaTauri and Haas in that fight, but with, only 4 races to go, and those two teams 18 points behind, it's going to take a lot, I think, for Haas or AlphaTauri to finish 6th in the championship. So, at this point, I would say the battle for 6th is between Alfa Romeo and Aston Martin, which, from Alfa Romeo's point of view, is very important, because Alfa Romeo have been known for the past few years of having a very small development budget, because they just don't have the finances of the other teams on the grid. If they were to finish in 6th, which would be their highest Constructors' title position or championship position, since when? 2012, I think, maybe? 2012, 2011, something like that. Maybe even back to their days when they were BMW Sauber. So, yeah, it would be a massive boost for them. And honestly, I hope Alfa Romeo hang on for 6th, because Aston Martin, whilst, yeah, it's good to see them performing better, scoring more points, I don't think Aston Martin really deserve to finish 6th in the championship because the car they've produced for this season has been pretty bad. And, yeah, I just don't think they really deserve to finish 6th. Also because, you know, Aston Martin have a lot more spending power and resources at their disposal than Alfa Romeo do. So I think, honestly, Alfa Romeo deserve to finish in 6th, but obviously Formula 1 is not all about, you know, that stuff, and we'll see how that plays out. But I'm rooting for Alfa Romeo. To be honest, if any of, you know, Haas or AlphaTauri were to make a comeback and finish in 6th in the championship, I wouldn't mind Haas finishing 6th as well, because again, they don't have, you know, the money and resources to fight with teams like Aston Martin, really, or even obviously the top 5 teams. So it would be a good story if that was to happen. But anyway, let's get into the teams, and of course, we will start with Red Bull Racing. And yeah, Max Verstappen won, obviously, the Drivers' World Championship 2 weeks ago at the Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. Sergio Perez, soon enough, was promoted up to 2nd for a Red Bull 1-2, which obviously gave Verstappen the championship in a very confusing end to what was a very long Grand Prix on the Sunday there. But yeah, coming into this weekend, it feels a lot more like the pressure is off for Red Bull. I mean, obviously, yeah, the Constructors' title hasn't officially been wrapped up yet, but they don't necessarily need to get all in a panic about anything, because now that the Drivers' title is wrapped up, the Constructors' title is most likely going to be wrapped up either this weekend or next weekend. So there's no real need to panic for the Red Bull team, and they can just really relax for their final 4 races. But they will be trying to, you know, keep up this long run they've had of, you know, successive race wins. They are now on, how many wins in a row? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, they've had 7 wins in a row in 2022. From the French Grand Prix to the Japanese Grand Prix. 7 wins in a row, which, to be honest, considering their car not being, you know, miles better than everything else out there, like other cars we've seen in the past in Formula 1 history, it's very, very impressive for them to have that many wins in a row. And a lot of those races that they've won, they've not even been on pole position for, such as Singapore, Monza, Spa. I know Verstappen finished in 1st in qualifying there, but he didn't start on pole, neither did Perez. And then, yeah, Hungary and France as well. So, yeah, it's very, very impressive run that Red Bull have put together. Now, of course, I know people will be saying, well, what is happening with the whole cost cap situation? Well, not much, to be honest. Yeah, there has been some news in regards to it, which is that Zach Brown, I think, has wrote a letter to the FIA demanding that there is, demanding that they are, you know, properly given a punishment for breaching the budget cap. And I'm just trying to read out what it says here. Zach Brown has told the FIA that teams breaching the budget cap constitutes cheating, as the sports governing body considers its response to Red Bull and Aston Martin's infringements. And yeah, that's the only thing really in regards to that whole situation that has happened since, you know, the last stream I did, which was the day after the Japanese Grand Prix, when we officially found out the cost cap findings for 2021. So yeah, I can't really update you guys anymore in regards to this story. The annoying thing is, we don't actually know what the timetable is for, like, punishment and the announcement of their punishment. We don't know what that timetable looks like. They could be given their punishment before the end of the season. They could be given it in December, sometime randomly in January or February. Again, I don't know what the timetable is for punishment. Maybe in their mind, the timetable or the deadline for submitting, or not submitting, but for giving them a punishment of some sort, is the start of next season. Maybe that's their own deadline, but we don't really know at this point. Because we know, obviously, Red Bull it's been confirmed they committed a minor breach of the cost cap regulations, but we don't know, again, how much they overspent by, what the overspend went on, and again, we don't know what's going to happen in regards to a punishment. They may enter into a accepted breach agreement, which I think I got into in my last stream, which means they would basically accept whatever the punishment the FIA gave them, or they could, appeal that and it'll go to like a arbitration, I think, panel or something like that. So yeah, it's annoying, but yeah, I can't really update you guys anymore on it because we don't know what is happening with this whole situation. So until we find out more information, we'll have to just crack on with the racing as normal, unfortunately. And the reason it's so unfortunate is because it's a clear cloud over, this year and last year and the achievements they've had in the last year or two. It really is a cloud over that. And, not knowing is the worst thing you can have with a situation. So, yeah, we will find out at some point. That's all I can say, really. I hope that at least before the end of the year, and when I say end of year, I don't mean end of season, I mean the end of the actual year, I'm hoping we'll hear something in regards to a punishment for the Red Bull team. But we will see what happens with that. But in regards to this weekend's US Grand Prix, Red Bull should be fine. They're not going to probably be massively quick in qualifying because this circuit, and this is why I love the Circuit of America circuit, it doesn't clearly suit one car over another, one type of car rather, over another. It's not like a power dominant circuit. I know you do have a very long back straight, but you also have a lot of medium and slow speed corners. You've got the very high speed, high speed, but twisty, tight and twisty first sector, which is not really about power or straight line speed. It's really about how good the rear end of your car is in hanging on through those corners. And as we've seen in the last couple Grand Prix here at COTA, with the bumps, and with these cars that are a lot more susceptible in their performance to bumps, that's also a factor for what's going to happen this weekend. So looking at, the track layout and looking at what the Red Bull car is good at and not so good at, again, in qualifying, I don't think they're going to be anything special. I don't think it's going to be, as comfortable a weekend as it was in Japan, for example, where Verstappen, was the clear favourite there to get pole and win. And relatively comfortably, he got both pole position and the race victory as well. It won't be as easy as that. I think probably in the first sector, you'll see Red Bull and Ferrari pretty much on the same pace, maybe Ferrari a tad quicker. And then in the middle sector, Red Bull will be quicker in that sector because it's, so power dominant. And then the final sector, it's probably going to be more so in Ferrari's favour. So it will be, in qualifying at least, a close weekend. In the race, though, one thing that does, I think, really play into the hands of Red Bull, and it probably will in qualifying as well, but more so in the race, is if those bumps, if they are as prevalent as they were like in last year's Grand Prix or in the Grand Prix in 2019, we know the Red Bull car handles the bumps a lot better. It's got a lot more of a smoother ride than the Ferrari car has, and the Ferrari car is a lot more susceptible in terms of its performance to bumps on track than Red Bull are. So, yeah, that definitely could play into the hands of the Red Bull team. So, yeah, I think Qualifying, I don't think they'll get pole position. I think Ferrari will. It'll be a close fight, though, between Leclerc and Verstappen, and a very, very good one at that, which I'm looking forward to. But in the race, I think they've got every chance of winning the race and even getting a 1-2 finish that would pretty much wrap up the Constructors' Championship officially. But it's going to be, it's not going to be a comfortable weekend. It's going to be a weekend where they're going to have to fight for, the big prizes, pole position and victory, which is all we want to see. Yeah, Red Bull have, in terms of results this season, on the Sunday, they have dominated this season, but, what we want to see at the end of the day, no matter who wins, is a proper fight between, different teams, different drivers and all of that. And yeah, I think we'll get that definitely this weekend, but it'll be a tougher weekend for them for sure. But let's get into some stats regarding Red Bull and Max Verstappen for this US Grand Prix. So Max Verstappen, he won last year's United States Grand Prix. This track where he, won last year was one of the best wins of his career. It was such a vital weekend for him. After, 2 or 3 Grand Prix beforehand, he didn't have the absolute best results, and Red Bull weren't quite firing at their absolute best. But then pulled out Verstappen, an unbelievable performance to get pole position and just about hang on for victory in what was a classic battle for the win last year. And he also has had 2 other podium finishes here, very impressive ones as well. 2019 he finished in 3rd. 2018 he finished 2nd, even though he started, was it 15th or 16th on the grid, and he only finished like a 2nd behind Raikkonen, who won the race. So yeah, that was an unbelievable performance by Max Verstappen. So do not doubt him around this circuit. And also, Red Bull, they have won the US Grand Prix twice since 2013. Obviously, Verstappen last year and then Vettel in 2013. And again, Red Bull need to outscore Ferrari by 18 points to win the Constructors' title. Again, it's possible, but they'll need a very, very successful race day to accomplish that. And now we will go on to the Scuderia Ferrari team. And I've actually just remembered something which hasn't been confirmed yet. I'll have a quick look on Twitter, but I just need to just have a quick look to see if this is absolutely, going to happen. Because I just said, obviously, that, I think Ferrari in qualifying, I think they're going to be just about the better team this weekend. And I think it's going to be a close fight for victory this weekend between the Ferrari and Red Bull team. But then I remembered that it is heavily reported for this weekend that Ferrari, with Charles Leclerc, are taking a new element on their power unit, meaning that Leclerc will have to take a 5-place grid penalty. Let me just find it. And yeah, according to how do you pronounce this guy's name? Giuliano Duchessa, who is a FIA accredited F1 journalist. He's always been quite close to Ferrari in terms of reporting news in regards to them, and he's been most of the time pretty accurate. He has reported that Leclerc will take a 5-place grid penalty for his 6th ICE of the season. And Ferrari apparently is testing an improved engine to solve reliability. And if the test does succeed, these upgrades will be used in 2023. Only Leclerc's getting these upgrades this year, so Sainz will have to wait. And also, Giuliano says or reports that a modified ICE requires a long process, so no changes have yet been requested by Ferrari for this weekend. Only a, quote, software token upgrade will be used to unlock more power from the power unit. The reliability cannot be solved this season. So, again, he does tend to be a bit of a reliable journalist. So, yeah, that looks to me to be pretty likely that Charles Leclerc will be taking, unfortunately, a 5-place grid penalty. I should have remembered that when I was talking about Red Bull. But, even with that penalty, let's say if he is taking it, and assume he is, I still think he is a very good chance that he'll finish in first in qualifying because, again, I think in quali trim, low fuel, I think the Ferrari car is probably going to be a pretty good car around this track. So I don't think the pace will be too bad. And he'll probably line up on the grid 6th or 7th, I'd imagine. Can't imagine him qualifying any lower than 3rd, to be honest. Or finishing any lower, in qualifying than 3rd. That would lead to a lower grid position than 6th or 7th on the grid with that 5-place penalty. So, yeah. Obviously, now when it comes to who's going to possibly win the race for Ferrari, all that hope goes onto now Carlos Sainz. But I just don't see Carlos Sainz really being able to compete this weekend with Verstappen and Leclerc on pure pace. If you look at, US Grand Prix from the past, he's had some good performances here, Carlos. For example, what was it, Toro Rosso? I think he finished 6th here in 2015 when he started, from the back of the grid. 2016, he finished in 6th here in a very underpowered Toro Rosso. His debut race for Renault was here when he finished in P7. And, those were especially great performances. But if you look at how he did in last year's US Grand Prix, let me just quickly have a look. Exactly. His pace compared to Leclerc wasn't great. Let me have a quick look. And, well, he was only about 1.5 tenths, say 2 tenths off in qualifying, but then in the race, he ended up about half a minute behind his teammates. So, yeah, wasn't a great race, really, at all for Sainz last year. So, if you're a Ferrari fan and you are pinning all your hopes on Carlos Sainz because Charles Leclerc, we think, is almost certainly taking a 5-place grid penalty, then don't get your hopes up because I don't think Sainz is really going to be able to fight with Max this weekend. So, in terms of the battle for victory and who is going to come out on top, my prediction is that in qualifying, I think Leclerc will finish first in qualifying, but obviously with that penalty, if he does take it, he'll be starting, if he was to finish in first in qualifying, he'll be starting the race in 6th. So I think it'll be then Verstappen on pole from probably Perez 2nd and then Sainz 3rd, and then the two Mercedes, say 4th and 5th on the grid. That's what I think is most likely going to happen in terms of the starting grid this weekend's Grand Prix. And then as for the race, I think Max Verstappen he will most likely win the Grand Prix on Sunday. The biggest question, if that is the starting grid, Perez in 2nd with Sainz 3rd, Leclerc back in 6th. The biggest question at that point is who finishes 2nd and 3rd, which will be a close fight, that battle for 2nd and 3rd, not just between Perez, Sainz, Leclerc, but also the two Mercedes as well. Who I'm sure will be a lot quicker in the race on the Sunday. So we'll see how that plays out. But in regards to who's winning this race, because Leclerc's taking that penalty, I think Max Verstappen has got this weekend really under control, and I think it'll be an 8th win in a row for the Red Bull team, unfortunately, for Ferrari, as their wait for a win since their last win goes on. And let's get into some stats regarding the Ferrari team quickly. So Charles Leclerc, his best finish at COTA is 4th from 2021 and 2019. And Ferrari's last win at the US Grand Prix was in 2018 with Kimi Räikkönen. What a drive that was from the Iceman. His last win in F1. And yeah, it was a tremendous drive from Räikkönen that day. But also, Ferrari have now gone 3.5 months without a race win, which is terrible because since then they've been on pole, I think, 4 times in the 7 races since then. So, yeah, it's a terrible record they've had since that Austrian Grand Prix win that they barely got with Charles Leclerc. And yeah, if Leclerc is taking that penalty, then chances are they'll have to wait until the Mexican Grand Prix to break that drought. But we'll now move on to the Mercedes team, who have just come off a very disappointing back-to-back from the Singapore and Japanese Grand Prix. Two Grand Prix where I felt they had a good chance at breaking their win drought. Singapore, I think they could have if Hamilton had not been held up behind Carlos Sainz for so long and obviously had not made his mistakes. I think that definitely was a possibility that Hamilton could have won in Singapore had things gone more his way before he made his mistakes. And then in Japan, I think Mercedes gambled a bit too much with the with their setup in terms of, I think it's pretty clear to see as well, they put a wet setup on their car in qualifying, obviously, so it would play out in the race. And in the race, where they were, stuck in the midfield pretty much behind the Alpines and that, they had a lot of pace. That was pretty clear to see, but they couldn't go anywhere with it because they didn't have as much straight line speed because they had a lot more wing on their car, a lot more drag, and they just couldn't really go anywhere with it, which is why from the Japanese Grand Prix they came away with such a disappointing result when they could have at least got a podium, I think, out of that Grand Prix weekend. I don't think they would have won the Japanese Grand Prix because I think Verstappen was just too good, but yeah, it was very disappointing how Mercedes got it so wrong in Japan. And the last two races really have been quite bad in terms of the points they have come away with. Lewis Hamilton, I think, only scored, 4 points, was it? No, it was 2 points, I think, in Singapore. And Russell obviously scored nothing. And then in Japan, Mercedes only came away with 14 points, which for them is quite a lowly amount of points. And really, if you look at it, they have not recovered since the Dutch Grand Prix, where they were so quick and it was looking like victory was... the chance for victory was, very good, but it was looking like it was in their hands, I guess you could say. And it was looking towards the back half of that race, or the back third of that race, it was looking as though Mercedes had at least a 50-50 chance of winning. But since then, and the way they got it wrong with the strategy and all of that, and they threw away the race win, since then they've just unraveled Mercedes. They've not really been in a position to compete with whoever's been fighting for the race win, and their results have been pretty disastrous, I guess you could say, since then. So this weekend they are looking for they're looking for some sort of bounce back to get back to where they were, say, just before the summer break, where they looked as though they were very close to winning races again. But yeah, since the summer break, it just hasn't materialized at all for the Mercedes team. Now, in qualifying, I think they'll struggle, as they normally do, because I just don't think their car, with the bumps around this track, I think their car is going to struggle a lot with the handling, unless those bumps have somehow been ironed out. We'll have to see, obviously, when we get to practice 1 tomorrow, which I will obviously be streaming for that session. But yeah, I think the bumps are going to struggle with a lot this weekend. I think if you look at the track layout, the first sector should be a very good sector for them, but really the second sector is going to be where they come up. Let me just rephrase my words quickly. The second sector is where they'll be tremendously weak, I guess you could say, because you've got obviously the long back straight. Mercedes don't have enough straight line speed compared to obviously Ferrari and Red Bull to be as good as them. And then you have some pretty pedestrian slow speed corners, which we know Mercedes, their car, is very poor in. The only other thing, though, that will help them in regards to qualifying is that the temperatures will be quite high, so they won't have to worry about warming their tyres up because the tyres will be pretty warm anyway for everyone pretty much. But yeah, it's going to be a struggle for sure with the bumps and the, say, second and third sector just not really helping their car get any closer to Red Bull and Ferrari ahead. In the race, though, I think they've got a decent chance of a podium. I don't think they are going to win the race. I don't think they're going to be really contenders for winning the race. But I think they've got a decent chance of a podium. Certainly with Lewis Hamilton, who we know is, incredibly quick around this track. He's won here at COTA 5 times. He is the record holder for race wins at the Circuit of Americas in F1. So there's no doubt that he will be doing the best he can and getting the best out of the car that is there this weekend. But if in regards to them actually getting the podium, it's going to be tough because I think, with Leclerc just behind them on the grid, most likely, he's going to be very quick. And then, Perez and Sainz ahead, they're not going to be, easy to overtake, easy to beat in the race. Especially Perez, obviously, in that Red Bull that is so quick in a straight line. So, yeah. I think for Mercedes, like I was saying a moment ago with Ferrari, I think because of Leclerc's most likely engine penalty, they'll line up 4th and 5th on the grid, and they will fight for the podium, but most likely they will probably finish in 4th and 5th or 5th and 6th. I just don't think Mercedes have enough speed for this circuit, and I just don't think their car really is good enough for this circuit. I just don't think this. When I imagine, their car around this circuit, I just don't think of it, this car, as being a car that's going to excel around this track again with the bumps and the slower corners and that big long back straight. So it's going to be a bit of a struggle this weekend for Mercedes. And to be honest, in regards to the Mercedes team, I wouldn't say there's no chance left of a victory for them. I think, there's 4 races to go. There's definitely a chance they can still get a win in before the end of the season. But the chances are very low, in my opinion, at this point. I think, again, because of the bumps around this track, I just don't think they're going to have the car really to handle well around this circuit. Mexico, I think, could be pretty good for them. With obviously the whole altitude thing, eliminating any differences in the power unit, who has more power, so on and so forth. That could definitely help Mercedes, and plus towards the end of the lap, or not towards the end of the lap, but in the middle sector, you've got some, quite high-speed corners that Mercedes would probably handle pretty well in. So, there's a chance there, and maybe in Abu Dhabi as well, but the chances of them winning a race before the season is over, from my point of view, is not very good at all. So, yeah, I think, honestly, at this point, I think their best chance of winning winning a race this season has already passed. Looking back, I think that Dutch Grand Prix, honestly, was probably the best chance they were going to have all season long, and they just didn't deliver on the strategy when they needed to, which is such a shame. But yeah, for this weekend, they'll be more competitive than they were last weekend, no doubt about it. But it won't be as good as maybe some people out there are hoping. But let's get into some stats regarding Mercedes and also Lewis Hamilton for this weekend's US Grand Prix. And Lewis Hamilton, yep, he has won the US Grand Prix 6 times since 2007. 5 of those wins at the Circuit of Americas. The only other win that wasn't here, but in the US, was obviously at the Indianapolis circuit, which obviously hosts the Indy 500, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, I think it is. And yeah, was a great win he had that weekend. And it was actually that win in 2007 was a week after his first win in F1. So was a great time for him at that particular moment. 15 and a half years ago was that win at Indy. Mercedes, their last win at COTA was in 2019 with Valtteri Bottas. Mercedes were incredibly quick in that Grand Prix that weekend. And Lewis Hamilton, his last win at the Circuit of Americas was in 2017. He has been always very quick here, but the last 3 Grand Prix here have not quite gone his way. So, yeah, that's why he hasn't been able to update that record when we thought almost certainly he would have been able to. Now, normally, after the top 3 teams, I would pause and read out your comments in the chat. But one thing I want to do quickly is move on to McLaren, because I want to actually show something on screen from McLaren or Daniel Ricciardo that's happened at the circuit today that I want to show to you guys, because I think you guys will enjoy it. But we'll just quickly move on to them and get into how I think they'll do. So yeah, for this weekend, obviously they need a big bounce back McLaren. They are now 13 points behind Alpine in the championship with 4 races to go. They can definitely catch Alpine and get back into 4th by the end of the season. There is no doubt about that. But can they outscore Alpine by enough in these final 4 races to actually get 4th in the championship? It's hard to say, really. I think looking at the tracks coming up, McLaren should have a good car for most of the tracks. Say this weekend, I think they'll have a good enough car. Definitely next weekend in Mexico. Brazil, probably a 50-50. Abu Dhabi, though, I think they'll definitely have a strong car there. So they've got the car, but have they got enough time left in the season to outscore Alpine by enough to get back into 4th place in the championship? Again, I don't really know if they will be able to do that. But in regards to this weekend's US Grand Prix, they should be pretty quick. McLaren, they've not really in the last couple of years had that bad of a US Grand Prix. And looking at the way the track is and the way the McLaren car is, I think they should be pretty quick here. Honestly, I'd say Lando Norris should be best of the rest after the top 3 teams, to be honest. And the reason I say that is because I think the McLaren car will just be a bit more suited to this circuit than it will be, say, for the Alpine team. The Alpine car, I think, is more suited to higher speed circuits like we saw at Suzuka. That's why they were so quick there, qualifying 5th and 7th and finishing 4th and 7th, I think it was, at the Japanese Grand Prix. So, yeah, because this track is, I mean, it's high speed in certain sections, but it is a bit slower speed of a circuit than it is at Suzuka. That will definitely help McLaren a bit. So I think Lando Norris will probably be at the head of the midfield pack in qualifying. Whether he holds on to that in the race, I don't know. I really don't know. It really does depend a lot on the start of the race and where the Alpines are on the grid. The Alpines most likely will be in the top 10. I think Alpine will probably get both cars into the top 10 quite comfortably. In regards to Daniel Ricciardo, though, obviously the last Grand Prix in Japan didn't turn out to be that great for him, but he was pretty unlucky. Qualified 11th. In the end, just didn't deliver a good enough qualifying lap, but then had a great start to the race, got up to 8th place. But then McLaren waited too long to pit him from wet tyres to intermediates, and that's why he ended up finishing, I think, in P11 in the race, just behind his teammate Norris, when if he did pit a lap earlier, Ricciardo probably would have finished in 9th or something like that. So, in the end, was unlucky, really, with what his team did, or decided to do, on the tyres there. So can't really blame Ricciardo there. And obviously both McLaren drivers do now have the upgraded side pod barge board area of the McLaren car. So they're all on equal terms now, which is great to see. But Ricciardo has had a couple good US Grand Prix here in the recent past. Ricciardo beat Norris here last year, finishing in 5th place, I think it was, and then in 2019 in the Renault, just about beat Norris in the McLaren to 6th place, when that weekend McLaren were quicker than than Renault, but Ricciardo put in a brilliant performance to still get a top 6 finish. And yeah, just looking, Ricciardo beat Norris, by 8 seconds in the race, and actually out-qualified him as well, just about by, 3/4 of a tenth. So, Ricciardo definitely, has a good record here. And I think one reason why he does enjoy this circuit, it's not really the circuit, I think it's the atmosphere of the US Grand Prix. I think he just enjoys being in this part of the world, to be honest, and I think that definitely helps his performance. When he's happy and more so confident, then that's when you get a better Daniel Ricciardo. I think Ricciardo definitely has increased in his confidence, because if you look since the Italian Grand Prix, he's actually been pretty good, Ricciardo. Should have finished 8th at Monza, car failed him, finished 5th in Singapore, and then should have been, 9th, maybe 8th in Japan if it wasn't for his team making such a bad cock-up on the strategy there. So Ricciardo's been pretty good in the last 3 Grand Prix. So do not count out Ricciardo having a good weekend here, especially if McLaren have a very good car for this circuit. But I did say that I wanted to show you guys something in regards to Ricciardo at the circuit today. And let me just get it up on my screen, and then I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. And I think you guys will enjoy this. Let me just see if I can get it up on screen. And I need to quickly plug my my headphones in so you guys can hear it. So let me just do that quick, and then I'll get it up on the screen for you guys. Right, so, and hold on. Not quite sure what's happening. I've plugged my headphones in. It should be working. Right. So let me just try and get it up for you guys quickly. So hopefully you guys can see this. Hopefully it's not too loud for you guys. And let me just play. This is Ricciardo on the horse. This is through the actual paddock at COTA. Let me just play it for you guys. Hopefully you guys were able to hear that. And great entrance there by Ricciardo at the track today, and for obviously the weekend. And hopefully he's in a good mood, and it seems he is, riding that horse. And let me know, guys, if you couldn't hear it or not, and I'll play it again if you want. But yeah, that's what Ricciardo was doing at the track today. One thing they should McLaren try and do is because he's done that before, obviously, with the whole cowboy hat thing. They should try and do like that ending of that classic western. Was it Good, Bad, the Good, the Bad, the Ugly, with Clint Eastwood? They should try and do that ending with the standoff. They should try and do that with him. That'd be funny, with him, Norris, on, I don't know, like Pato O'Ward or something like that. That'd be some good social media content. But that's Daniel Ricciardo at the track today. But guys, let me know in the chat, how do you think the top teams, and McLaren as well, how do you think they're going to get on at the Grand Prix this weekend at COTA? Let me know right now in the live chat, and I'll get through some of your comments quickly before we go into the rest of the teams. Quickly, just want to say, don't forget, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe for more content like this, because I'll be live tomorrow for practice 1 and practice 2 watch-alongs will be starting at 7:45 p.m. UK time, and firstly until 9 p.m. UK time be streaming and doing the practice 1 watch-along. Then from 9 until 11 p.m. we'll be doing a build-up into practice 2, and then from 11 p.m. till 12:30 a.m. UK time, we'll be doing a watch along for practice 2. Practice 2, by the way, is because normally practice sessions are an hour long. Practice 2 will be an hour and a half long because Pirelli want to do tyre testing for 2023, extra tyre testing. So that's why that session is a bit longer. So I'll be streaming for that tomorrow. And then on Saturday, I'll be streaming from 6 p.m. UK time, firstly until 7:45 p.m. for the qualifying preview. Then from 7:45 p.m. UK time until 9 p.m. I'll be doing the practice 3 watch along, and then from 9 to 11 p.m. I'll be doing a build up to qualifying. 11 p.m. UK time till 12 a.m. or midnight I'll be doing the qualifying watch along, and then for about half an hour at least after the qualifying session is finished, I'll be doing a reaction to the session with you guys. And then on Sunday I'll be live again at 6 p.m. UK time for the race preview. And then we'll be doing the race watch along from 7:30 p.m. UK time all the way through till 10 p.m. The race starts, remember, at 8 p.m. UK time. And then for at least an hour after the race finishes, whenever that may be, I'll be doing a race reaction with you guys. In regards to the race watch along and whether I'll be joined by my co-commentator Niblo, I don't know yet. We will see. I think chances are he'll probably join us for either this race or next weekend's race. I don't think he'll be on for both. I think that's very, very, very unlikely. But yeah, I think there's a chance that he could be on for one of the, either this weekend's race or next weekend's one in Mexico City. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully he can obviously join us for both, but it is on at a very bad time for him. I think like 4 a.m. or something. Or 4 a.m. or like 5, 6 a.m. I think the race for him. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Can't blame him, to be honest, if he doesn't want to come on at that time, because it is a horrendous timing for him. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, those all the timings and my schedule for this weekend. And I will, if there is enough news or stuff to talk about from the US Grand Prix, I will also be doing a United States Grand Prix live review on Monday night at 6 p.m. UK time. But again, only if there is enough to talk about. If there isn't, then there won't be one. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. And for everyone watching right now, if you haven't already, don't forget to smash that like button or to help out the channel growing. Now, quickly, there isn't a ton of comments in the live chat. I'm just going to quickly go through them now. And hello to everyone who's posted a comment, and hello to everyone obviously watching as well. Eric says, in America they have Thanksgiving football. I wonder if next week's race would be or could be called Halloween F1. Well, obviously the actual Halloween is on the day after, but with the whole Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico, it's going to be I'm sure, a glorious atmosphere for the Mexico City Grand Prix. Serena says, hey Chaz, my old cell from a lifetime ago finally broke. New name, now old, was Sparky. Okay. Now you have a new sub. Awesome vids as always. Cheers for that. Yeah, and cheers for letting me know that as well. Eric says Red Bull could have a 99% podium rate this season. There has been a Red Bull on the podium in every race except the first race in Bahrain. Yeah, you are right with that. I don't think it will ever break the you can't ever break the record of Ferrari and Michael Schumacher in 2002, where Michael was on the podium in every single race in 2002. Obviously won almost all of them, but he had at worst third place in all of those Grand Prix that year, and didn't even retire from any of them, which is quite astounding back then, 20 years ago, that Ferrari had such a great reliability record when the cars back then were so much more unreliable. Shows you how great they were back then. Serena says, I hope they don't give them a one race penalty this year. It would be BS if that's all the penalty would be for Red Bull. CID says, effing fucking love it. No one can top that entry. Yeah. It's typical Daniel Ricciardo stuff. And good to see that, he's having fun, because I was a bit worried about his mental state, but just, how he was generally, because obviously of how bad this year's been for him and his situation at the minute, him not being on the grid for next year. But things, they're going more his way, and they are, what'd you call it? The days are looking brighter at the minute for Daniel Ricciardo. I think he's definitely happier now than he was about 2 or 3 months ago, for sure. When we reviewed that video of him saying that he's leaving McLaren at the end of the year, he looked quite depressed behind the eyes, for sure. Hello to Don. Pete Dunn says, poor guy, 4 or 5 a.m. race style. Welcome to my life, lol. Yeah. Well, we've all eventually, during the season, got to take that pain at least, which is at least something that we all get to share, that pain of waking up or staying up for so long, to be awake at that time to watch F1. But if you're in Europe like I am, of course, we definitely have it so good here, and it's obviously a Europe-based championship, so we're always gonna have it good here in terms of timing. But to be honest, looking at the F1 calendar, I think if you're gonna have, because I think next year we've got 24 races, and we're gonna have probably 25 races on the calendar for 2024 or 2025. You should definitely increase the amount of races at or in more, or say less European countries, I reckon. If you're going to have that amount of races, and I know people will be mad at me saying that, because they'll be like, but we want, the Nürburgring on the track, we want this circuit on the calendar and all of that, Hockenheim and great tracks like that. But if you're going to have that big of a calendar, I don't think you should have it be like, 20 of the 25 races be in Europe, and then, 5, 6 races or whatever be outside of Europe. I think if you're going to have a 24, 25 race calendar, you should probably have at most half of the calendar in Europe, and then the other half, wherever else, which I think we kind of have got at the minute. For this year, which has been, a 22 race calendar, we've had how many races in Europe? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So, yeah, exactly half. So pretty much how we've had it this year is how, I would have things. Because the calendar, back in the day, it used to be, say, 16, 17 races long, but 13 of them would be in Europe. Or 12, 13 of them, something like that, would be in Europe. So, yeah. It's good that, F1 is spreading the races out, but not all the countries that we are racing in necessarily deserve to have Grand Prix, of course. But I think we will now move on to the rest of the teams. So what we'll do is, go through the rest of the teams, and then we will get onto an onboard lap of the circuit, just so any new people watching, want to understand what this track is like. We'll get into some of that in a moment. But let's now go on to the Alpine team, who, had a great Japanese Grand Prix, and that result they got at Suzuka, 4th and 7th, was absolutely what the doctor ordered. Because after Monza and Singapore, where they scored no points at all, it was looking pretty desperate for them. It really, really was, especially after McLaren's 22-point haul in Singapore. It was looking as though maybe that double DNF in Singapore might have been the death knell for them in finishing 4th in the championship. But thankfully, they bounced back with a brilliant result. And I've got to say, their pace in Japan was very, very good. And with the new upgrade they've got with the floor that they brought to Singapore, I think in Japan we actually got to see just how good that upgrade is. And it's definitely very good for them. It's definitely moved the car on by a couple tenths of a second by the seams of it. And I think they should have Alpine a strong finish to the season. Now, does that mean they still finish in 4th, where they are now? It depends on a lot of things. Obviously, luck, what the weather does, reliability, stuff like that. But if you're looking at pure pace, Alpine should have the pace to finish 4th in the championship. Maybe not pull away from McLaren between now and the end of the season, but maintain where they are, which is 13 points clear of McLaren in 4th place. In regards to this weekend, they'll be fine. I think both cars will be in the top 10. Alonso and Ocon are both pretty good around this circuit. Ocon especially, I remember he's had a very good couple races around here. Finished 6th here for Force India in 2017. I think for Racing Point, he finished 7th here in 2018, but then got disqualified for something that the team did, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, he's, always been very quick here. And Fernando, we know, is pretty much quick around every single track. So, yeah, Alpine will be fine. And as long as they have both cars, and actually looking at it, as long as they got both cars scoring points in the final 4 races, then unless McLaren go and win a race, which would be amazing, then I don't see how Alpine are going to be beaten in the championship. So that's really all they've got to do. Double points finishes to the end of the season, and they should be absolutely fine. Now we'll go on to Alfa Romeo, and yeah, they are under real pressure now for that 6th place in the championship that they've held on to, I think, since, Monaco or Baku of Alfa Romeo. But yeah, they are finally coming under pressure for that position. Aston Martin only 7 points behind, and they can definitely, Aston Martin, overtake them. Aston Martin, we know, have very good performances on a Sunday when the points are scored. And as long as Aston Martin have decent qualifying results, we know that the threat is definitely there from Aston Martin to Alfa Romeo. The only thing Alfa Romeo can do at this point is just go out there and, give it their all and see what happens. I mean, I don't think they can really, at this point, with the car they've got, aim for particular results, because they haven't scored a point, Alfa Romeo, since Monza, where Zhou Guanyu scored just 1 point. But if going back before then, the last points finish they had was in Canada. So since the Canadian Grand Prix, they've only scored 1 point. They've actually been the worst team on the grid in terms of points scored since the Canadian Grand Prix, even worse than Williams. So I think since the Canadian Grand Prix, I think Williams have scored how many points? 5, 6 points, something like that. So it shows you how far they've dropped off Alfa Romeo, which is not really their fault. It's down to Alfa Romeo just not having really the money to develop their car. I think Alfa Romeo have only got like a $2 to $3 million development budget. And yeah, they just don't really have the car to, or not the car, they just don't have the resources and the finances really to, to keep, not to keep up where they are, but to, keep up with teams just ahead of them like Alpine and McLaren. It's just not possible for them, which is a shame. But we think, obviously, that Audi are going to be their partners, Sauber's partners, once Alfa Romeo leave the Sauber team at the end of next season. We think Audi are going to be their partners, so they should hopefully get a big boost in finances from the Audi company, especially once we get to 2026, when Audi actually come into Formula 1 with their power unit and so on and so forth. So, yeah, for the rest of the season, yeah, Alfa Romeo just need to go out there and give it their all and see what happens. Again, I don't think at this point, considering how poor they've been in scoring points since the Canadian Grand Prix, I don't think we can really sit here and say, this is what realistically they can get or should get, because I don't think really at this point, that they're in that position. So we'll see what happens with Alfa Romeo, but really, if they're going to finish in 6th, they have to hope that Aston Martin just, don't have any more big results like they've had in the last couple weekends in Singapore and Japan. If Aston Martin keep that up to the end of the season, then Aston Martin will, unfortunately, overtake them. We'll now go on to Haas F1, who have announced, not today, was it today? I think it might have been yesterday, that they have a new title sponsor for next year, which is MoneyGram is the title sponsor, and that will give, apparently, Haas enough money to go right up to the budget cap limit from next year on, which is great, because I think development has been a big problem for them, especially this year, because they started the season off very quick, but then they've just dropped off a cliff, kind of like Alfa Romeo, and both teams, just don't have the money really to develop at the minute with their Formula 1 cars. So that is great for Haas. They obviously didn't have a title sponsor this season after what happened with, Nikita Mazepin's departure, the Russia-Ukraine war starting, and then the sponsor being dropped, and all of that. So, yeah, it's been financially a bit of a tough year for Haas, but, that's what's happened. But thankfully, they have got now a title sponsor, so maybe next year they can develop their car a bit better and get a bit higher up the championship than what we've seen this season, because this season has been a bit of a disappointment for them. Last year and even 2020, they didn't even develop their car really at all, because all the focus went into this year's car, and they actually made a pretty good car for this year, but because they didn't have the money really to develop it, they just, they've fallen off massively. When looking at it, they should be really 6th in the championship, given how good their car was at the start of the season, if, it had the money behind it to develop this car, but again, just hasn't really at all. In regards to this weekend, obviously, their home Grand Prix, what's possible for them, I'm not really sure anything is, to be honest. In Japan, their pace was okay at times, but really, since that Austrian Grand Prix, they've not really had the pace whatsoever to be anywhere near a top 10 finish, say, in a Grand Prix. Obviously, Mick Schumacher got into the top 10 in qualifying at Zandvoort, but that was a false dawn, I guess you could say, for them. They just haven't really gone anywhere since then. So I don't really see anything changing for Haas F1. I think the only thing in regards to this team and, the fight in the Constructors' Championship, the only way I can see them either staying in 8th, where they are, and they are still level on points with AlphaTauri, who are 9th, the only way I can see them maintaining their position or going up is luck. I just don't see how their car is good enough, really, at this point, to be going any further up the championship. And now we'll go on to AlphaTauri, who have had, a good last few races. Obviously, Gasly scored points at Spa and Monza and Singapore as well. In Japan, though, there was no points, I don't believe, for the AlphaTauri team, which was a bit of a disappointment for them, because I think Tsunoda was in the was he in the top 10 in qualifying in Japan? I can't remember if he was exactly, but they had a decent qualifying with Tsunoda, I remember. But ended up with nothing. And coming into this weekend, they've got a massive fight on their hands to somehow reclaim positions in the championship. Level on points they are with Haas F1. I think they should be able to climb above Haas. I think they, at this point, have a much better car than Haas. Again, Haas, they've fallen off dramatically because of the lack of development, and AlphaTauri, of course, they don't have that trouble in terms of developing because they have a lot more money at their disposal, obviously being owned by the Red Bull team. So, yeah, with AlphaTauri, they should be, between now and the end of the season, I'd be very surprised if they're not finishing 8th in the championship ahead of Haas. I'd be surprised at that. At this point, I think it's probably difficult to see them being ahead of Aston Martin. Maybe if they have a really big points finish for whatever reason before the end of the season, they could. But, yeah, it's going to be really hard for them to get any higher than 8th in the championship. In regards to this weekend's race, they'll be okay. I can't say anything more than that. I don't think they'll be terrible around this track. I don't think the characteristics of this circuit mean that they're going to be, especially bad, like they have been at times this season. But I don't see them being particularly great around this type of circuit. It's not high speed enough for them, I think, for the AlphaTauri team. So they will be solidly in the midfield pack. Maybe they'll grab a couple points in the race. It's hard to say, though, really, because we don't know exactly, obviously, at this point, where or what grid positions they're going to have for the race. But it'll probably be somewhere between 11th and 15th, or somewhere like that. We'll see how that all shakes out. Of course, teams like, them, Haas, Alfa Romeo, Aston Martin, they're always very close in qualifying, so it's hard to predict how they're going to do in the race when in qualifying it's going to be so close. And then for Aston Martin, obviously they are now got their eyes set on a possible 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, and they're only now 7 points behind. Can they actually finish 6th in the Constructors? It's going to be close. It's going to be really, really close. I think most likely they will score points in either this race or next weekend's race. I don't see them scoring points in both. If they were to score points, though, in both races, that would be something quite special for them to keep up, such a great run of points finishes since Singapore, considering their car is still not that good, to be honest. It's not that quick of a car, yet they keep getting somehow points finishes out of it, which is, quite surprising. But, if they want to finish 6th in the championship, I think if they get a points finish out of either this weekend or next weekend, that'd be at least something for them going forward. And then, in regards to the final 2 races, Brazil and Abu Dhabi, I think Abu Dhabi, because of the way that track is, I think is likely to help Aston Martin. I think Aston Martin will probably be pretty quick there. The problem is the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, I just don't see how that's going to help them at all, because we know how bad their car is at high-speed circuits. And I know that track obviously is at altitude, but you do need to have pace in a straight line to be quick at that circuit. It's not quite as high altitude, I don't believe, as the Mexican Grand Prix in Mexico City, where straight line speed doesn't matter at all, really, around there. So, it's going to be really close. It's going to be probably a 2 to 3 point thing in either Alfa Romeo or Aston Martin's advantage at the end of the season. But I am going to predict Alfa Romeo to finish 6th in the championship, to be honest. I think they'll just about hold on, because I don't think Aston Martin, even though I think they'll get a couple more points finishes before the end of the season, I don't think those points finishes will be enough to overtake Alfa Romeo. But in regards to this weekend, they should be decently quick. I don't think they'll be, in qualifying, decently quick, but in the race, they should have the pace to at least be contending for a point or two. Whether they get a point or two is another story, but I don't expect them to be massively quick in qualifying here. I think next weekend, though, Mexico, I think you'll see Aston Martin a lot more competitive there. I think that's most likely going to be their most competitive Grand Prix before the end of the season. So if you're an Aston Martin fan and you're desperate for them to climb up another position in the championship, then yeah, keep that Grand Prix in your diary, the Mexican Grand Prix or the Mexico City Grand Prix, because yeah, that's going to be their best chance or your best chance. But it's going to be a very close fight, no doubt about it, for 6th in the championship. And finally, we'll go on to Williams. Yeah, they're going to be the slowest team this weekend. I'd love to say that they will be, you know, somewhat up there, but I just don't see it happening. I think this track is very aerocentric, and Williams don't have a lot of that. So, yeah, they'll be consigned, most likely to the very back of the field. And I've just received a super chat. I will get into that super chat in just a moment. Thank you for that. Let me just quickly, though, get on to a onboard lap of the circuit. Let's go on to the track map here. So if you are new to Formula 1 and you've never seen racing around this circuit before, here is the circuit. As you go up to turn 1, it's an uphill turn 1, which is quite unique on the calendar. Then you go downhill into turn 2, and then turn 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7, and 8, and 9 is a very fun, tight and twisty section, which is reminiscent of the, I guess the S's at Suzuka, but also the, Beckett's section at Silverstone as well. Then into turn 10, that's flat out. Into turn 11, you go into a hairpin, and then the very long back straight where there is a very long DRS zone as well. A lot of overtaking is going to take place there on Sunday into turn 12, and then you go into a very slow and pedestrian turn 13, 14, and 15, and then after turn 15, it's a quadruple or triple apex, turn 16, 17, and 18, I believe, and then into the the quick left-hander of turn 19, and then a medium speed turn 20 as you go back to start your lap once again. But now let's watch this for the onboard lap. This is onboard of an IndyCar around this circuit from I think 2 or 3 years ago. I think this is Graham Rahal. I'm not sure what car exactly. I will admit my IndyCar knowledge is not great, but as you can see here, him coming through those S's sections, it is such a thrilling part of the track, and definitely one of the best parts of any circuit on the calendar. And it really does test the cars and the drivers, the reaction time, obviously, of the drivers, but also the rear end stability of the cars themselves as he now heads down into turn 11, I think it is, which is the hairpin before the long back straight. Traction is important to a certain extent on the exit of that corner, but really it's all about your straight line speed, period, on this back straight. And it is quite bumpy as well, and very bumpy as well into the braking zone of turn 12, where we've seen some accidents in the past. And hitting the apex of that corner, very, very important. And now you come into a very pedestrian slow, I think turn 13, 14, 15. And this is all about getting the front end in as much as you can to the corners, rather than having a stable rear end, which Graham does nicely. And then into these corners, got to make sure, obviously you have a stable rear end, but got to make sure as well that your front end isn't washing out, because if it does, on the marbles, you can get very wide and go off the track there. That part of the track, well, you can see he massively extended the track limits there to go a lot faster, which we'll see if that happens this weekend. Most likely it won't. And then the final corner, very important on traction on the exit as well. And that is a lap around the Circuit of Americas. And it is a great circuit. I really like the circuit. I think it's one of the most underrated tracks. I know a lot of people, for some reason, online think it's this, like, terrible circuit for some reason. But, yeah, I've always loved this circuit. It's one of the best new circuits we've had in F1 in the last, say, 15 years. It's such a good track. But let me quickly read out some final comments quick. Nicholas Walker asks, any chance of a Mercedes win? Most likely not. I think Mexico next week is more likely, but it's overall the chances of a Mercedes win before the end of the season, I think, is not that likely. I'd say 15-20% chance at this point that there's going to be a Mercedes win before the end of the season. We'll see, though, how that all plays out. And let me read out the super chat from Jane Swinnerton for £1.79, who says, imagine if it rains. It would be great if it rained. It would, but unfortunately, it's a hot, sunny weekend the whole weekend through. But yeah, we've had as well some great moments here in the wet. That 2015 race we had in the wet where Hamilton won his third World Championship was a classic. It was a brilliant Grand Prix where really we didn't know who was going to win the race for pretty much the entire one. You had obviously the Red Bulls leading. I think Ricciardo was leading at one point. Was Daniel Kvyat leading at one point, I think? And then obviously Hamilton and Rosberg. You had Verstappen right up there, was getting a podium in a Toro Rosso. And the Ferraris coming back through the field. It was such a great race. But yeah, unfortunately won't happen. Sid or CID says, my brother lives in Austin and attends the MotoGPs often. I think last year he went to a race after party at a hotel and saw Lando Norris there. Says, by the way, it won't rain, just partly cloudy with a 7% chance of rain. Yeah, it's looking pretty good in terms of temperature and weather condition. And yeah, Lando Norris, he has been to a few MotoGP races. I know he went to one at Silverstone in 2019, I think. Because I think he's a big Valentino Rossi fan. Just seeing, actually, Simon Lazenby has tweeted this. Obviously, he's the Sky Sports F1 presenter. He's just said on Twitter 20 minutes ago, Red Bull are calling a press conference for tomorrow morning to address the cost cap breach. Obviously, tomorrow morning being in Austin, not tomorrow morning, our time. And also, apparently, Motorsport Italy reported earlier today that Christian Horner could reveal the exact figure the budget cap infringement is about this weekend. So maybe we'll hear some more details in this press conference, and we'll see what happens with that. And obviously, when I do my Practice 1 and Practice 2 watch-alongs tomorrow, guys, I'll keep you updated with, you know, if anything happens in that press conference that you guys should know about, I'll let you guys know tomorrow. Yeah, Kota is a great circuit. Vika says, Brazil best bet for Mercedes. I don't think so. I actually think that's probably one of the worst tracks for them. Because again, slow speed corners they struggle with, and there's quite a lot of those in the middle sector. And then, obviously, the long straights. I don't think they're going to have a good weekend there. With Mercedes, I would say Mexico is their best chance, I would say. But again, their chances of winning a race before the season is over, I don't think is very good at all. But guys, I think I'm going to bring the stream to an end. I've been going for, an hour and a half, and we're pretty much done here. So yeah, I may as well bring it to an end. Just want to say, obviously, thank you guys for coming along, but also make sure to come around tomorrow for my Practice 1 and Practice 2 watch-alongs. So 7:45 PM UK time, I'll be going live for the Practice 1 watch-along. That will last until 9 PM. Then 9 to 11 PM UK time, I'll be doing the build-up to Practice 2. And then from 11 PM till 12:30 AM UK time will be my Practice 2 watch-along. So make sure to join me for that tomorrow, guys. And of course, Saturday and Sunday, I've got plenty of content heading your way as well. If you want to know exactly the timings of those streams and all, and what I'm doing for Saturday and Sunday, I did mention it earlier in this stream, so make sure to go back early in the stream to try and find it. But also, if you go to my community tab on my homepage and go to the second post down, you'll be able to find all of the timings of, all the content I'm doing for this weekend. So if you want to go find that, then make sure to go to my community tab. But yeah, thank you guys for coming along, and before you go, obviously, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this and all the content I've got coming up this weekend. And don't forget as well to hit that notifications bell so you're notified. For everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash the like button before you go to help out the channel in terms of growth. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 and join our Discord server, link below in the description for that to join our wonderful community. But guys, until my US Grand Prix Practice 1 and Practice 2 watch-alongs coming up tomorrow evening, starting at 7:45 PM UK time, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.